I was doing a session with ninth graders. It was a session on sexual literacy, and we were talking about sex and reproduction. This one boy said, "Ma'am, I've seen in this old Bollywood movies that these brides, all decked up in their, bridal attire, sit on this decorated bed with a glass of milk." And in my mind, I thought, okay, this boy is now going to ask me, what is this milk for? What he asked me, he said, okay, so do these brides mix Viagra in the milk?
Why is this milk there?
Yeah, and I'm sure this boy's parents, when the school probably sent a consent form that, do you agree to your child attending a sex ed session in school, they would have had a heated debate at home. He's only in the ninth grade. Do you think this is the right time to introduce him to the topic of sex? Not knowing that the children are far ahead. I honestly sometimes feel that the parents should be a fly on the wall when we are doing these sessions to see the kind of questions that they have.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor, your habit coach. And today we have a very interesting conversation. We're going to be talking about the talk. How as adults and as parents, we can have the conversation around sex with our children. Because they have so many questions that they want answered. Unfortunately, they go and find these answers by themselves. And we are too shy to talk to them often. So we have an expert with us. We have Anju Kish with us. And we're going to talk how to talk to your children about sex. So Anju, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashton. Such a pleasure being here.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
When we talk about sex, right, half the time we blush when we are talking, even as adults, to other adults or people who are older than us. How do parents ever get around to having this conversation with like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old? When is the right time to have these conversations?
I think parents just don't have this conversation, at least most of the parents. And if you think about it, actually, we humans have been around for billions of years. So obviously, sex has been around for billions of years. So just imagine in this 1 billion year, if we just conservatively take that figure, we still haven't figured out a way to talk to our children about sex. And that's really something to think about, right? And especially as we are one of the most populated countries in the world.
Where are all these people coming from?
Absolutely. But I think the conditioning is so strong about not talking to your kids. It's against our culture. There has to be a boundary between what parent and child can, talk about. I think that and a whole lot of ifs and buts. What's going to be the impact if I talk to my child about this? I think that just stops people from having these conversations.
So ideally, should you wait for the child to come and ask you questions? Should you open up? Like, according to you, and you've been doing this for so long.
Right.
What is the best way that you've seen as a way of having this conversation?
Not every child asks you a question. So if you wait for a question, you may be just forever waiting. And that's not the right way to go about it.
The child shadi ki raat, huh?
Well, even then, even then. The shadi ki baat reminds me of an incident. I'll come to that soon. But don't wait for a child to ask you a question. Start the conversation as early as possible. And do not think that this conversation is a one-time conversation. You don't sit a child down and say, okay, today I'm going to be talking to you about the birds and the bees. It's not that anymore, When a child is, say, very young, when you're teaching them the names of all their body parts, which could be 1 year, 2 years, teach them the names of their genitals also. Don't give them those baby names, this is your nunnu and vivis and peepees. Give them the right terminology. If you can call an eye an eye, why can't you call a penis and a vulva a vulva? And the child will just beautifully accept it.
Correct.
So start at that point of time. Then as they grow slightly older, teach them about privacy, teach them about private body parts, teach them about private spaces, what you do in private spaces, what you do in public spaces, teach them about boundaries, teach them about consent. Now, having these conversations very early on will lay the ground for you to have deeper conversations later on and have conversations which is sexual in content later on. Like, for example, if you're teaching a very little child consent, and it could be as basic as, asking them that, okay, do you want to brush now or do you want to brush after 5 minutes, for example. Let the child choose, and it's teaching them that, A, they have a voice and what they choose is accepted.
Interesting.
Teaching them consent at that age. Later on, it will be very easy for you to teach them sexual consent.
And the thing is that when we were growing up, the concept of consent didn't exist at all. Correct. Right? It didn't, even good touch, bad touch, etc. when we were growing up didn't exist. It wasn't taught to any of us.
But that doesn't mean it didn't exist
As a concept of conversation.
As a concept of conversation, it was not there.
Correct.
And I think if we look back, all of us have had some experience of inappropriate touching growing up.
Correct.
So, but those conversations were not there at that point of time. Yeah.
You didn't even know it was inappropriate. You didn't know how to have a conversation with anybody about. So, like, if you had to think about children growing up in stages, like years are normally the way that we think about children.
Right.
3 years, 4 years, 5 years. At which year would you have what conversation?
So, okay, I'll give you a kind of a breakdown, but please know that this is a generic kind of not a rule, but a categorization of the topics you can speak to, but it's absolutely child dependent.
Fair.
So, by the age of 5, your child should know the correct names of the body parts. They should have idea about what are boundaries, what consent is, what is privacy. They should know about that. 6 to 8, you can actually go into the depths of safe touch, unsafe touch. It's no more called good touch, bad touch. It's safe touch and unsafe touch.
Safe touch, unsafe touch.
Unsafe touch. And it's not just about touches, it's also about unsafe behaviors.
Okay.
So talk to them about safe touch, unsafe touch and behavior.
Can you expand a little bit on this and then we'll come back to that?
See, what people usually, the terminology earlier used was good touch, bad touch. But what can happen, sometimes a bad touch can feel good to a child. And a child can be very confused, but it's feeling good. Is it a good touch?
Correct.
So we've moved away from that vocabulary. We use the vocabulary of safe touch and unsafe touch, and there's a clear-cut distinction of what this involves. But it's not always about touches. Somebody could be showing pornographic content to a child. Somebody could be just stripping and flashing in front of a child.
Correct.
That's an unsafe behavior. So to get that clarity that even this needs to be reported, you need to talk about unsafe touches and behaviors.
Okay.
At the age of around 8 to 9, you should start the talk on puberty, because today puberty is happening very, very early on, and the kids need to know. In fact, puberty is a conversation which is absolutely non-sexual, and you can even tell a 5-year-old about puberty. There's absolutely no hesitation should be there to teach that younger child about puberty. But by 8, 9, you should definitely start if you haven't started earlier.
2 questions.
Yes.
As you said, puberty is happening earlier and earlier. Is it amongst boys and girls is happening earlier, or is it happening primarily amongst girls earlier?
It's happening with both. Maybe not as early with boys like earlier. Today girls are starting puberty by 9, sometimes even earlier. Boys are starting by 10. But again, there's a range between 10 and 15 is what we say boys start, and girls start between 9 and 14. Some earlier, some later. But we know girls' puberty is starting because they might get their periods, and that could be an indication which everybody knows. But there are other signs of puberty which we may not recognize.
And how would you have a conversation on puberty? Like, what would be the conversation that you would have with the child? Like, how would you bring it up?
Even with a very young child, for example, supposing you have a boy, or say you have a boy, and you tell your boy, okay, listen, look at dad and look at yourself and tell me what is the difference you see. So it could be, okay, dad is taller, dad has facial hair, dad's voice is deeper than my voice, dad has hair on his body. Now that could be it's a conversation introduction to puberty. That you know what, when you turn a certain age, these are the changes you're also going to experience.
So it doesn't have to be you'll get pubic hair.
No.
So it can be all these other things.
All these other changes.
And people will shy away from this conversation because of the word puberty and pubic hair and all of that conversation. Right. Interesting. So
though it's not called pubic hair because it happens at puberty, it's called pubic hair because it grows on the pubic
pubis,
bone.
Correct.
Yeah.
Puberty and is not related to the pubis, and
the pubic hair starts growing at puberty, but the term pubic hair is because it grows on mons pubis, the area.
Fair.
But yes, we shy away from puberty because we think, we'll tell them later. Girls, we'll wait till the last moment till we have to tell them about periods. And boys, most parents think, what's the need to talk to them? What do you tell them? I mean, we grew up without this conversation. They will grow up to what's there to talk to boys about. But there is so much to talk to boys about puberty. And sometimes the boys go through a lot of trauma because they don't know certain things.
Correct. And they get made fun of as well.
They get made fun of. The most common question I get from grade 4 up to grade 12 is about the size of the penis.
Right.
And it starts as young as grade 4.
So that's when they're noticing and
that's when they're noticing, they're comparing, they're going to washrooms, they are checking each other's genitals out. It starts from that age. So why not give them the right information so all this behavior doesn't happen? So yes, so that's the age to talk about puberty. By the time they are 11, 12 latest, you should talk to them about sex and reproduction. Because kids today very, very early on are asking and they have a fair enough idea.
Right.
So by 11, 12, you should definitely talk to them about sex and reproduction. Then post that, there are hundreds of topics. 13 upwards, you have to introduce them to, of course, the concept of pornography, the impact of that, talk about masturbation, do's and don'ts, relationships, consent again, sexting, dating, safe sex, contraceptives, healthy relationships, healthy breakups, changing relationship with parents, changing relationship with peers. There are hundreds of topics.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the parents listening to this conversation right now will be like, oh God, how do we even do this? But because it's a vast topic.
That's why I said it's not a one-time conversation. It's actually a lifelong conversation. I mean, today, if I want to go to my gynac and talk about menopause or perimenopause, that is sex education too.
It continues forever.
It continues forever. It continues forever, yeah.
But it's interesting, like you said, like at the 12th grade when you start having the conversation around sex. Do you have it from...
12 years.
12 years, sorry.
Yeah.
12 years. So around the 12-year mark when you start having the conversation around sex, is it something that you do from a reproductive standpoint? Like this is a mechanical way in which this works? Or do you talk about it from a mechanical / pleasure point of view as well?
You do introduce by age 12, you have to talk about pleasure too. But if a child is younger, if a child is say 7, 8, 9 probably, then you only talk about it from the reproduction point of view. But by 12, you have to introduce the pleasure aspect, though you may not dwell too much on it. But you do mention that, okay, couples come together and have sex not just for reproduction, but also because it's pleasurable. You do talk about it. You talk about emotions. You talk about compatibility and the works over there at that point. But, you lay the right foundation, I believe. I always say that sex education is incremental. For example, you don't teach a first grader math equations, right? You teach them numbers, then you teach them addition, subtraction. That's exactly what sex education is. You start with the basic, lay the right foundation, and keep building on that foundation.
I love it. So you don't do algebra and log tables right in the beginning.
Absolutely.
Okay, fine. Fair enough. What are some of the conversations that parents find particularly difficult to approach or have, and how would you guide them through those?
I think the most difficult conversations parents find is, of course, where do babies come from? What is sex? And today kids are gone beyond that. The most common question, like I was mentioning to you, Ashton, earlier, we get from second graders is what is 69?
Second grade.
Second grade.
Do second graders need to know what 69 is, or do you just say, no, it's a bad thing, you don't talk about it? Like, how do you approach it?
You never do that. You never do that, because the moment you brush aside their question, growing up, we may not have had options. Today, they have an option. At the click of a button, they'll be on the internet searching for what 69 is. In fact, that's what a second-year-old girl did when her mother and teacher couldn't give her a reply which was satisfactory enough about what is the middle finger. She went online. She found out what it means. One thing led to another. She landed upon a porn site. But there are always age-appropriate ways to explain these kind of concepts. So it may be not completely 100% there, but you lay the foundation.
Can you give me an actual example or a script that you would go through? Like when parents are listening to this, they're saying, okay, fine, I know I have to have these conversations,
right,
but I don't know what I need to be saying. If
right.
you have like a set of things that you would explain in detail, so then we understand the tone of voice that you would have with a child.
Right.
Would that be possible?
Absolutely. So let's say 69. I think that seems to be the most popular question currently amongst children.
Where babies come from, nobody's concerned about, but now it's all these things that pop up far more.
Far more, because they are hearing older kids say this and they're catching on to the terms, and they've realized that the moment they use these terms, they're getting a reaction. And because they're getting a reaction, they keep saying it, not really understanding what it means. In the classrooms, teachers are facing this, math teachers especially. Any sum the math teacher says, somebody from the back will scream out 69, whole class will dissolve in laughter, and the teacher doesn't know how to handle it.
Understood. Interesting.
Or the middle finger one is, of course, another very, very popular question. So, okay, if it's 69, you could possibly, and it's a very young child, then possibly you could say something like, sometimes we use numbers to denote certain things. For example, if you want to pee, you say, I want to do number 1. Or you want to poop, you might say, I want to go for number 2. Or also we have the term 420, the number 420, right? A cheat, we'll say, 420. In the same way, 69 is a number used to denote intimate moment between two adults. So when they come very close together, they say, some people say that, oh, they are doing 69. But please know, it's a very adult concept, and it's not a very respectful concept for a child to say or use. I think for a child, that's enough.
You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details.
You don't have to. And I think that's what parents are, they shy away from conversations, because if a child asks them what is sex, for example, they're like, oh my God, does that mean I have to talk about penis and vagina? Do I have to talk about foreplay? Do I have to talk about orgasm? Oh my God, I'm not going to speak about this. And that's the end of the conversation. But you don't have to. Always remember, it's incremental learning, incremental teaching. Give them that little bit of information, satisfy that curiosity, and build on that platform that you've created.
So what would be level 1 of explaining sex to a child?
So typically, a young child doesn't ask what is sex. They first come up with how baby got into the tummy. That's their typical question. Then they hear the word sex somewhere, and then they come. If a very young child asks you what is sex, you can just talk about male and female concept of sex to begin with. But if you see it in their eyes that they say no, but it means something else, then okay, they have some information and they want to know what that is. Now, to a very young child, the way you could explain sex is it's adult couple through a special process. When they produce a baby, that is known as sex. Just that much. That's it.
So special process could be like one ceremony that's happening.
Just with special process or a scientific process. You can use these big terms with them sometimes, which they don't know how to grapple with it, and they just accept that. There will be some kid who'll want to know more.
But how? Correct.
Yeah, but how? Well, you've seen in plants how it happens. The seed falls. So in the same way, so the woman has a little seed inside of her. It's known as an egg or ova. And a man has a little seed inside him. And they come together, and the seed transfers into the woman's body. And that's how a baby is created. And that process is also known as having sex. Just that. As they grow older, then you talk to them. Hey, remember when you were a kid, I told you that this process of seed transferring happens. Do you know how this process of seed transferring happens? Okay, so the male genitalia, enters the female genitalia, and that's how the seed transfers. You've done that, been there. The next level of information could be, okay, so a couple, comes together in this intimate way, not just for reproduction, but it's also a way for adults to express their emotions, to express their affection for each other. And it is pleasurable for them. But please know that this is only valid for adults. In India, it is illegal to have sex till you're 18. Now you start bringing in the laws. For everything, please tell your children the laws around it. That is extremely important. You keep adding on to information as they keep growing.
For everything, as in what are the...
When you're talking about pornography, because they'll ask you why I can't watch.
It's illegal that way.
It's illegal. So, as a sex educator, my job is not to tell them what to do and what not to do. It's not to bring my individual values into the conversation.
It's all cultural in any case. And
it's yes. And even as a parent, I think if you adopt this policy, it works beautifully with children, where you tell them that, okay, this is what sex is. These are the positives. These are the negatives. These are the laws around it. These are the consequences. These are the positive aspects of it also. And my values say X, Y, Z. And leave them, because whether you want them to or not, they will ultimately do what they want to.
Correct. But I like the part about my values are this.
Yeah.
Or in this family, we look at it this way.
Yeah.
This is the legal part. This is what you hear this. But in our family, we believe this is the way to do it.
And this is my point of view. Why I believe that the values that I follow, give them a reason for them. Because today's children thrive on logic.
Correct.
They do not want to hear that, oh, this is not the right thing to do. But why is it not the right thing to do?
Who said so?
Who said so? Stop talking to me about all those old things. It doesn't apply. Show them why it applies. If you believe in it strongly, then tell them why it applies. Give them the logical explanation for it. And that works beautifully, I feel, with children.
Yeah, because when you were talking as well, you were saying when a couple comes together, right, you were using words like not mummy, daddy, or not when married couple or people who love each other. There are different cultural overtones to each of those ways in talking about
Right.
a couple.
Yeah. And then there's small things you can add on to an older child, especially that, okay, when this couple, now sex can be just for pleasure. It needn't be love between the couple. It can just be pleasure. But there are three things which always have to be part of it. One is respect, one is consent, and one is contraceptive. And explain to them why all these three are important.
Interesting. So at this point of time, you bring that conversation.
Yeah, consent any which ways you bring, because you've already taught them consent. If you've taught them consent at a very young age, which could be social consent, then you talk about sexual consent.
And it is different now because you're saying that consent has to be asked for instead of people asking you. So earlier on when they were children, it was them saying yes or no for the consent. But now that as a child grows older and is exploring, they have to learn how to ask for consent as well.
And they have to learn both. They have to respond to a question which has come to them about consent, and of course ask that consent also.
Do we need to teach our children how to say no?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, and teaching no to saying how to say no, a child would learn better if you have given them an option to say no. How many times we just force our children to do things, right?
You have to do this.
You have to do this, yeah. And it doesn't mean that, okay, you take away that decision making, for your child out of your hands completely. It doesn't mean that, because then there's no balance there. The child will do what they want to do. Give them options. Okay, today for lunch, we are going to be making, we have an option of making bhindi, or we have an option of having gobi. What would you like? You want them to have your veggies. So, okay, your salad options are this or this. Okay, today we're going to be having chicken, but before that we need to eat a salad. Do you want a broccoli salad? Do you want a whatever?
Understood.
Some other salad.
Right.
Give them choices. And when they say a no, ask them why they're saying a no. Because if you walk over their nose completely, they start developing an attitude. They have a feeling that, okay, my no is not
worthless.
Considered. It's worthless. They don't have any bodily autonomy. So if somebody does, touch them in an inappropriate way, they say a no, they'll say it feebly, knowing that their no has no value.
How do you have these conversations around abuse with children? To first find out if it's happened to them, or if the child comes and tells you that this is happening, how do you deal with it? Because there's so many times I'm talking to people who have been abused as children, my age, and they were like, nobody listened to me. Right. Because it was a close family member, nobody spoke up or said anything. How should we thread this line as parents?
So you start again these conversations very early on. You speak to them about first their body parts, private body parts. Then you explain what safety means to you as a person, that what are the things we do to keep our body safe. It could be as simple as wear a sunscreen to protect it from the sun. Or
it's not, this is why we wear pants, not like
no,
that.
Don't begin there. Just begin from general safety.
Understood. Okay.
If it's raining, we take an umbrella to protect our body. We wear shoes to protect our body from pebbles on the street. So talk about general safety. And then talk about, okay, there's another thing that we need to protect our body from, and that's called unsafe touches. So what are these unsafe touches? Which are the private parts of the body? Who can touch us there? And then some safety rules about how if somebody's touching you there, you say a no. And it's not just touches in your private parts. We do a connection in the workshops we do at Taboo. We do a connection between emotion and touches. For example, somebody may just touch me on my shoulder, but I might get that very creepy feeling. So we teach them to recognize that feeling and tell them that you have a right to say no to that touch. So we give them autonomy of their body. We tell them how you can say a no, what to do in different kind of situations, and the most important and critical thing, that you are never at fault. A child feels very guilty. They somehow feel that, it's my I am responsible for it. And for something like this, I always say it's also what we parents say and do. We may tell a child that, okay, if anybody touches you, come and tell me and I'll help you. But at another level, for some other thing, we always blame a child for things.
You must have done this.
Yeah. For example, I may wake up with, my child may wake up with a cold, and I'll say, what did you eat today? Did you have an ice cream? Or, anything else. So it is, if the school, somebody calls me from school that come meet me, I'll say, what did you do? So we're constantly putting the blame on the child. Now, in this case, when a child gets inappropriately touched, they hesitate to go to the parent because they feel that
they've done something wrong.
Yeah. they've done something wrong and that's why it's happened to them, and they'll be blamed and nobody will believe them. Majority of kids do not go and tell their parents this. So having these constant conversations and telling them, drawing up a list of trusted adults with them, who all they can go to tell. Because sometimes they may hesitate to tell a parent, but maybe they have an aunt they're comfortable with. Maybe they have a teacher in school they're comfortable with. Help them draw up a list of trusted adults who they can go and, talk to. That could be one way too.
It's very interesting. In India, go and give this uncle a kiss. Go and do this. Go and do that. Picking up the child, playing with the child. It's very common. It's not thought of as anything taboo.
Right.
But like abroad now, it's becoming very, very cautious on touching people's children, etc. Like even in a park, you just won't go and start playing with someone's child. What is your take on this this journey? Where should we be on this?
Yeah, I think sometimes we feel we've taken, not to take away from the seriousness or of the topic of safety of a child, but sometimes we are just overcautious also, I feel. And that sometimes takes away from spontaneity of relationships also. So this is again a point where consent comes into play, where you tell your child that, okay, this is, your auntie has come. Would you like to give her a hug? Would you like to do a high five? Or would you just like to say a hello to her? Let your child decide.
Instead of the auntie come and saying, come here, let me give you a kiss.
And at this point, the parents have to be firm. They can, sometimes the relatives take offense at this because they want to pull the child into their lap. The child is refusing. You can tell the we are teaching our kids, safety rules. So please don't mind if our child decides how they want to greet you or they don't want to come sit on your lap.
Oh, that's a nice way of saying. We are teaching the child safety rules. So the child might behave unfriendlily right now.
Because that's another reason why parents still force the children. No, because in India, if you're going and meeting your nephew or your niece and they don't come and hug you, you take offense.
Total insult.
Yeah.
So instead, so as an adult, so like for example, I'm an adult. I don't have children.
Right.
But if I'm meeting my friends' kids, what is the way in which I would approach this? So I just leave them be, not approach them at all? Should I go ask for a hug? What should I be doing?
Just give them a fist bump. Do a high five to begin with. Hey, hi. How do you feel comfortable greeting me? Ask them. And you need to ask the parents too. Are you okay if I hug your child? If your child is okay with it. Because that is another thing that you need to ensure that.
Correct.
Because sometimes, again, the child may be very comfortable hugging you, but their parents might still not. They may not be able to say it. So that's another thing one could follow.
Very interesting. What are some of the funniest questions that kids ask and stump parents with?
Well, recently, in fact, this happened. And in fact, I did a reel for Taboo on this, where this little girl asked her mom that, the mom said that she'd been listening to this song, Laila, oh Laila. Har koi chahe tujhse milna akela. And she asked her mom, why does everybody want to meet Laila akela? I thought that was such a cute and, cute question. I think more than funny, it's just questions.
It's a curiosity.
It's just curiosity. There was one time I was doing a session with 5th graders, and these were boys, and we were telling them about periods, and I showed them a sanitary napkin, and I showed them how, we take an underwear and we put it inside there, and this little boy in front, his jaw dropped open. And he said, you wear a pad in an underwear? And I said, yes. Where did you think it was worn? He said, I thought it was put inside shoes. And I was like, why did you think so? He said, I don't know. I see all these ads where women are wearing white pants and they bend down, tie their shoes and they run. And it says how comfortable it is.
So sweet.
And I thought that was such a great observation and a message to be sent out to the sanitary napkin brands.
Yeah, so true. And that itself has so much shame and taboo around it, right?
Yes.
All the sanitary napkins that talk about smell and all those aspects.
Oh, the worries the kids have, the girls have. So many worries. And because sometimes we parents tend to pass on what we've been told. And that's something I like to tell the parents that, we maybe have been told something by our parents, but before we pass that information to our children, please do your research. How many girls reach out to us during the workshop, we don't want to get our periods? Moms have told us that once we get our periods, our height will stop growing. Please, that's a myth. It doesn't work that way. So do your research and then give the information to a child, because very small information like these can cause so much of trauma.
I think what you're saying is so important because a large number of parents use guilt to manipulate their children.
Right.
Right? And it's very easy to use guilt in these conversations to manipulate your children into doing the things that you want them to do. How do you handle this? How do you talk to parents about using guilt, using things that are probably manipulative in nature with their children?
I think that requires a lot more conversation with the parent, because it's again conditioning, because their parents did it to them.
The same thing.
They did it. They do it to their parents.
And so much shame around it.
So much shame around it. Yeah. There are lots of mistakes we parents actually make. One thing which comes across very often by children in the workshop is their fear of remaining short.
Really?
Yeah. They're most worried about height. All my friends have become taller. I'm the shortest in the class. Will I grow tall? Will I grow tall? That's such a constant worry with children who start puberty a little late, or maybe who are just short in height. And I think a lot of it stems from home. Because when we tell our kids are growing, we tell them, okay, you know what? Why don't you join basketball? Your height will grow. I'm going to put a rod here. Why don't you start hanging? Your height will grow. Instead of encouraging them to play a sport for health reasons, maybe hang from the rod. Maybe you'll get more, muscle power. Instead of that, we pin it down to, the height or the way you look. And that carries forward in there, that insecurity. And anyways, the children in school are teasing them, so they just become more insecure. That insecurity might turn into them bullying other kids to feel powerful.
Correct.
So it's a cycle.
Right.
It's a cycle. So these small things, if we at home can change and have more positive conversations around things, I think that would really help.
This part of guilt, shame, and the other big one is comparison.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was sitting with my friend's kids the other day, and this kid was saying, this one got her period and that one got her period and this one's still waiting, but look at how this one got it. And I'm like, comparison is a huge part of school culture itself. Right? Like when you think about the marks that you get, marks are nothing but comparison parameters.
Correct.
How, as parents, do we catch ourselves from this comparison trap and still explain these concepts without falling into it?
I think as far as sex education is concerned, and comparison usually comes in during puberty, when you're talking about puberty. And yes, you are looking around, you're looking at other kids, and then you're comparing your child, and then that insecurity of yours as a parent gets passed on to the child.
You're not growing your muchi yet, where it's not come yet.
You're not eating well enough, so that's why you're not growing, you're not exercising. I think it's important to tell the child that, puberty hits everybody at the time that their body is ready for it. So if everybody is short up in your class and you're still short, don't worry. Maybe puberty does not hit you. Enjoy your childhood some more. And give them examples of people around you. Like we always in our workshops talk about, okay, who's one of the greatest batsmen in the world, right? Sachin Tendulkar, and look at, he's pretty short. Look at all the Khans of Bollywood. They're pretty short. So does your height and the way you look ever stop you from achieving what you want in life? Does it change you as a person? Do you choose friends based on, this person is tall, let me be their friend. This person is fair, let me be their friend. Is that how you choose your friends? And that suddenly resonates with them. And I don't choose my friends that way. So then why am I worrying about the way I look? Because other people are not going to choose their friends based on how they look.
Correct.
So a positive way of having conversations with children is, I think we just need to change our parenting style, tweak our parenting style just a little bit, and look at the more positive perspective and speak in that manner to a child.
Instead of saying, if this does not happen, this won't happen, which is a negative way of saying this.
Right.
Look at it from saying that if you're comparing, say that, this is actually a good part of you in terms of growth. I like that. What are the strangest things, like for example, if a parent has to have a conversation about sex with a child, the parent first has to know about sex.
Right.
Correct. Like they made baby, but that's not the same thing as knowing all the questions that a child is going to ask you.
Right.
How do you suggest parents learn about sex, and what are things that you found in your career about parents being completely have zero knowledge on? Like what are the things that they don't know?
So there are a lot of concepts parents don't know about, and I think over here probably I'll just talk about the fact that sex and sex education are two absolutely different things.
Correct.
So when you hear the word sex education, this word sex in the terms sex education completely becomes magnified, and the education word becomes invisible, right? And you just presume that sex education is talking to a child about sex.
Especially now it's called sex ed. So education bhi chala gaya.
वो भी चला गया, correct. So you just say, oh no, you just fear this term and say, I'm not going to give sex ed to my child. So first get over that fear. Understand that sex education is a very wide term. It's an umbrella term. If you're talking to your child about safe touch, unsafe touch, that is sex education. Talking about puberty, sex education. Talking about crushes, dating, relationships. And of course, sex and reproduction is part of sex ed, but it is beyond that. So sex education is more about giving the kids right information about their bodies, relationships, and teaching them, empowering them with tools to make informed decisions and responsible choices. So just intersperse this word sex with safety.
Safety education.
Yeah, and suddenly you'll have a different perspective. Then it transcends all boundaries of ages, and everybody needs safety education at every point in their life. So first get over this hesitation of this term sex education. And now as parents, we need to educate ourselves on a whole lot of things. Now that we know that, okay, sex education is not just about sex, and we know about sex because you are parents and have been sexually active. Now what else is there that we need to know about? You need to know about gender. You need to know about sexual orientation. You need to know about all these different terms which you see floating around, whether it's binary, non-binary, cisgender, transgender. What do they mean? You're living in a society, your child is growing up in these times where it's important that you know this, and you'll be only able to support your child if you know what these concepts are. Learn about that. Learn about what's exactly consent mean. What are the layers in this? It just doesn't mean, it's not just about no means no. There are lots of layers to consent. Learn about that. Learn about masturbation. I mean, we say that sex is a taboo topic with children, but masturbation is an even more taboo topic.
Correct.
A parent can talk to a child maybe about sex, but they'll really hesitate before they talk about masturbation because they just cannot see their child as a sexual being.
Correct.
So that is something you definitely need to talk. So know about how do you talk about it to a child? Do you know the do's and don'ts about masturbation? Today, kids are asking their parents, young girls are asking, wanting to get sex toys. Is it, would you be able to have a conversation with your child about that?
Barbie and sex toy, same conversation.
Sorry?
The Barbie conversation and sex toy conversation, same conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, because it's a toy, so then I should be having it because kids play with toys.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah. So go and educate yourself. There are lots of resources available. There are lots of experts around. Reach out. Read books. Online there is so much content available. Reach out to us at Taboo. And educate yourself, because I think it's important. Whether you are still able to have the conversation with your child or not, whether you want to send them to an expert, whether you hope the school will take this, baton up, but you need to be educated so that in case your child asks you something or you want to open a conversation, you're ready.
Correct. And it's and the beauty of this topic is that there are so many different things to keep learning, right? Like even as an adult, there's just so much to keep learning. Like you might know how to have sex because you had a baby, so
right. Clearly
one tick mark there. But how to have pleasure through sex is different. What are the different kinds of pleasures that exist through sex? Have you ever read the Kama Sutra, which is a very empowering book if you actually go through and read the original version of it? Right? Have you understood so many different formats of sex, energetic sex? It's an endless topic, but everyone's just at the surface level, not.
But I think even if you're at a surface level, the moment we tell the parents that, okay, go read the Kama Sutra and talk to your child, they're going to. So, okay, parents, don't panic. Take a deep breath. Just start with the basics.
So the first time Funda was the Kama Sutra for yourself.
Right.
Because the Kama Sutra also has things on like how to court and how to send gifts to the person that you're interested in.
One of the parent talks I was doing, after the parent talk that I finished that, and this a lady came to me and wanted to have a private conversation, and she told me, I've been married for 15 years and please, I want you to be very honest with me and tell me that is female orgasm really a thing? Because my husband told me it doesn't exist and I've never experienced it. Now, it breaks your heart. And we've never been spoken to about this growing up, right? And where do you get this information? Today, of course, you have access to the internet and you can go to the internet and figure. And I'm sure when her husband told her this, he wasn't just saying it to ward it off, but the fact that probably he doesn't know it too.
No clue.
No clue.
No clue. It was so funny. I was talking to an elderly gentleman the other day, part of our business, etc. So he's probably in his late 60s, etc. And we were having a conversation, and I was showing him my YouTube channel. I was saying that we cover topics like masturbation as well. So male masturbation and female masturbation. So he heard the male masturbation thing, and he looked at the female one and said that women do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. No, you're blowing my mind right now. Really? I was like, you've never had this conversation with your wife? Now you're pushing it too far. How can you have this conversation with your wife? Right? Like, there is so much taboo with talking to your own partner about these things. Imagine then talking to your child. Right? Like, does untabooing also start by having these conversations with your partner?
I think the parents should, maybe as a couple, you do whatever your comfort level is, but get a comfort level with the child. A lot of times this question is asked to me, that who should be the one talking to the child, the father or the mother. Usually this duty gets pushed to the mother. And the mother will keep telling the father, okay, at least to the boy you talk about stuff, but invariably, in majority of cases, we see it's the mother talking. But I think as a couple, this conversation should be had together with the child. There are a lot of advantages to that. Plus, if only one parent has this conversation, you're sending the message to the child that there is something shameful about these conversations. You're keeping one parent, away from this conversation. And secondly, even if one parent is having the conversation, both parents should be on the same page. They should agree on a lot of that, yes, this is the age to talk about it. This is the topic I want to talk about. And that being on the same page will only happen when you're having these conversations with your spouse.
Open communication with what it is that you want to be talking about. You were going to tell me a story about marriage. Right in the beginning you said that I'll tell you this funny story later.
So there was this, I was doing a session with 9th graders. It was a session on sexual literacy. And we were talking about sex and reproduction. So this one boy said, ma'am, I've seen in this old Bollywood movies that these brides, all decked up in their, bridal attire, sit on this decorated bed with a glass of milk. And in my mind, I thought, okay, this boy is now going to ask me, what is this milk for? You know what he asked me? He said, okay, so do these brides mix Viagra in the milk?
Why is this milk there?
Yeah, and I'm sure this boy's parents, when the school probably sent a consent form that, do you agree to your child attending a sex ed session in school, they would have had a heated debate at home. He's only in the 9th grade. Do you think this is the right time to introduce him to the topic of sex? Not knowing that the children are far ahead. I honestly sometimes feel that the parents should be a fly on the wall when we are doing these sessions to see the kind of questions that they have.
You've never done that? You never put up videos on conversations that you'll have done?
We don't record it.
Oh.
Because if we record the conversations with the children, we're not creating a safe space for them to open up.
You can blur out the children.
But if they know that the camera is there, they won't open up. In fact, we also request the teachers and counselors to step out of the room. Unless there's a policy in the school, we tell them, just leave them. So that, because, if they ask us some questions, they know they're not going to see us probably again till the next year, but they have to face the same teacher and counselor in the school the next day.
Correct.
So they fear the judgment.
Judgment from them.
So we don't record these sessions, but we have a huge suitcase full of chits of questions which these kids ask us. It's a treasure trove. And those questions I do put out on the Taboo and stuff for parents to see, and they get shocked out of their wits that a 9-year-old can ask you this, a 10-year-old can ask you this. The crazy kind of questions. And it's coming very, very early on today.
And you guys have to think on the spot on how to answer these.
That's right. That's right. On the spot.
So,
and it has to be age appropriate.
Correct.
Like if you're doing a session with 5th graders and it's a topic on puberty, and they want to know about some absolutely an adult concept, then we have to figure, okay, how do we answer this without brushing it under the carpet? At the same time, we don't want to give them information which is probably not valid at this age. But this is because our hands are tied as far as school is concerned, right? We're dealing with somebody else's child. But as a parent, what I would tell parents is that if a question has come up, give them an answer. Because if you don't, Google Zindabad.
So, Anju, tell me something.
Yeah.
We had this whole conversation on what parents should be doing with their children. Why can't they just outsource this whole thing to you?
I love you, Ashton. Thank you for marketing on Taboo for me.
Because this is the easiest, right? Like, you know what? You should just go ask this Anju auntie. She knows everything. Like, I'm not getting paid for this, but like why?
My name is actually, my name is Anju Kesh, but my middle name is Sanjeev, my husband's name. So it's Ask, actually. My initials are Ask.
So cute.
So, yes, I would love it. I mean, we do a lot of private workshops, open workshops. We go to schools. Please send your child to us. We'd be more than happy.
Can you imagine a birthday party where you have one conversation? It should become like that, right?
Absolutely.
Like everybody, like right now, fitness birthday parties are becoming a thing where, you know what, earlier we used to get drunk at our birthdays. Now we will all do like a Zen sound bath. That's happening with adults, right?
Yes.
Like imagine if the same thing happened for children where, you ask all your questions, get it out of the way.
Absolutely. In fact, we tell all the girls to have a period party.
Absolutely.
The first time
menopause
they get the
party also is very important.
Absolutely.
Which most people think of as shameful and oh no, now I've gone over.
In fact, when we're talking to 15, 16-year-olds and 18-year-olds, we do talk about this fact that listen, how you went through these difficult times during puberty. Please know your mother is probably in a perimenopause stage and her hormones are raging too. So it's a very difficult time. Now it's your turn to be supportive.
But do we say difficult times? Do we say aren't we layering it when we say things like that?
See, it could be difficult for some. It may not be difficult for some. But I don't think there is any problem in labeling it as difficult time. Because it is difficult. Why are we shying away from saying it as difficult? If somebody is going through, for example, perimenopause stage, it's horrible for some women. And it could be anything. It could be from night sweats to, excessive bleeding. I can't say, oh, no, perimenopause is okay. I'm dealing with it. It's not difficult. It's just about how you deal with it. No, it is difficult. So when people say about happy periods, please, it's far from happy for a lot of people. So why shy away from saying those terms? But difficult doesn't mean that you sit in a corner and cry.
Correct.
You deal with a difficult situation, right?
In school, we used to look at all these diagrams in our 9th standard, 10th standard book.
Right.
Correct? Now, clearly after you become an adult, you suddenly realize that these diagrams have nothing to do with any form of reality that existed outside. Right? Like, what is the, and especially for me in my school, I came from a Jesuit school, St. Mary's. So I had one priest teaching us about sex education. And the standard joke was, why is he teaching us about sex education? He's never done it. Then how is he going to teach us about this? Right? And we had one bio teacher that everyone had a crush on. So now, there are so many different variables in this conversation that is going on. Right? So when you all go and have these conversations with Untaboo, right? And have these conversations with children, how is it different from what the school is supposed to teach you?
So today, a lot of schools today still don't call experts to do sex education in the school. A lot of time counselors handle it, or a lot of time gynacs are called in, or some parent who's a doctor who's told to come and take a session on this. Now, please don't get me wrong. I have nothing against those, people who are doing this and doing it out of their own free will and doing it,
Everyone's trying to help.
Yeah, everybody's trying to help. But those people will only probably talk about the physical aspects of it. Comprehensive sexuality education includes the emotional aspects. It includes social aspects, behavioral aspects. There are many aspects to sex education, just doing the mechanics of things. For example, would a doctor be able to talk about consent? Would they be able to talk about sexting? They'll be able to talk about the mechanics of sex and reproduction and periods. What about the other things? And unfortunately, what happens in a lot of schools, the moment they do a one session like this with a doctor or a counselor, and it's a tick box. Oh, we've done sex education. We've covered it. Not knowing that there are so many more topics you've not covered, which are in fact more crucial. The mechanics of it you still get to know.
Correct.
But the other bit is what you don't know. Nobody talks to you about. And even if you go on the internet and search it out, 100 websites open up.
Yeah.
How do you know what is factual, what is not? The kind of things children tell us. And when I say children, these are young adults, 18-year-olds, who tell me, ma'am, you're teaching us about contraceptives, but do you know that if a couple has sex and the girl gets up immediately and jumps up and down, she will not get pregnant? Or, if a couple has sex in a swimming pool, the girl will not get pregnant.
Or everybody in the swimming pool will get pregnant.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. That also goes around. Now, this is something they've heard from the internet or heard from a friend, and imagine them believing in this can be life-changing.
Yes.
They can impregnate somebody, or you can get pregnant. It can lead to STIs.
Yes.
Today, kids, the older kids, when I talk about older kids, and probably this will shock the parents, but today kids as young as 8th and 9th grade and even earlier are dating. And when they're dating, there is sexual intimacy involved. When there's sexual intimacy involved, you need to figure out what kind of sexual intimacy. Of course, any kind of sexual intimacy under 18 is illegal, right? Secondly, if
It's illegal even between the same age group.
even if it's consensual and you're under 18, it's under the POCSO Act, it's illegal.
So a 15-year-old with a 15-year-old,
Yes.
it's illegal.
It's illegal. Yeah. And the law is gender neutral. So both will be liable for consequences.
Okay.
Besides this fact, if they're indulging in any kind of sexual intimacy, and these kids today don't think that oral sex is sex. And oral sex is emerging as one of the largest contributors to STIs.
Correct.
Oral sex, anal sex. And they're watching, unfortunately, the generation is growing up on porn. They're watching that, they're trying to emulate that, and they're opening themselves up for, if not pregnancy, at least STIs.
Are we noticing an increase in STIs amongst younger kids?
See, we don't get to know that. But we do get, this is what the doctors tell us, that there's a major rise in STI cases and a lot to do with oral and anal sex.
Interesting.
What we do notice in kids, school level kids, is a lot of use of what they call Plan B, which is emergency contraceptives. Eye pills, emergency pills. Because again, they think that pregnancy is the only concern.
Bad problem.
Yeah. And they also pop an emergency pill even if they've just had oral sex, because they, just to be sure. Now, this fact that oral sex does not lead to pregnancy, they're not aware of. Or they have doubts in their mind.
Correct.
Okay, let me be safe, let me pop an emergency pill, not knowing what's it doing to their body.
Correct, complete wreck.
And that means you've had unprotected, whatever kind of sexual activity. Do you know that STI can happen? How do you protect yourself? So these are conversations. That's why I said change this term, sex education. Change the word sex to safety in your mind.
Fair enough. Last thing. How can people get in touch with you? Where can people find you and have these conversations and take this forward?
So we are on Instagram as Untaboo. We are also, we have a website called untaboo.online where we offer a whole lot of programs. We have online programs which are recorded, which parents can buy for their children. And of course, we have workshops, private workshops. You can reach out to us, DM us on Instagram, and we'll add you. We have a whole WhatsApp group community for parents.
Oh, wow. Oh, perfect.
This is age-wise community where they join in, they ask us questions, we help them with answers.
Lovely. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with us.
Thank you, Ashton. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Same here.
IVM